A Person Institute is a research and training institute using collaborative dialogical practices to rebuild lives. Here we see you as a person, not as a diagnosis that may have defined or limited you in the past. Here we believe in you. The narratives of pain and suffering our clients begin with are transformed into conversations honouring their innate strengths, resilience, and hope for the future. This podcast is to inspire and share stories of hope and healing for both people who suffer and the people that are trying to support them.
Who are suffering. And our ideas are that who teaches us to help is the person that is suffering, that they have their own wisdom and their own self-agency that they can share with the clinician. And then collectively, the clinician and the person who's suffering at that point in time can come up with new generative ideas to help in that moment. And we also see that life is a series of moments, that if people are walking together and they're journeying together, that eventually they'll reach a place of so much hope and so much possibilities. And so I'm going to ask our wonderful guest to come in and we can have a little bit of a conversation on this. So when I was just saying that, our wonderful guest, what kind of ideas were going through your mind?
Hi. So first off, what really came to me was this idea of hope. It's a very abstract idea, but it's something that's really prevalent within nature. We know every single day the sun will come up again. We know that spring will come back. And just like nature, we as people have our own seasons. So it's not to say that winter will never come or the trauma will never come and there will never be bad times. It's a reminder that one day there will be a spring again. There will be moments that we can feel good again. And we must appreciate everything for what it is, because even in these dark, painful moments, they remind us about how beautiful it is when we do experience these pleasurable feelings like joy and love and the fruitfulness of spring. There's this quote always floating around on the internet, talking about how diamonds are made from coals receiving pressure, or how seeds grow in the dark. We as humans, we are going to experience difficult things, but it's going to make us better one day because of it. One day we will be a big flourishing plant, and you know, maybe the next year we'll need to be cut back a little bit, and you know, but there's always a reminder that we will continue to grow and that that pain is not forever.
That's a that's a wonderful way of talking about being in that space. And what I was thinking about is that I think it's very tough when people sometimes are told that they have a series of symptoms that doesn't hold that hope. That sometimes people are told that what they're suffering from might not, like, it won't be like, it won't happen that way. And so I think often when, especially when people are younger and they're told that the ways in which they're suffering are attached to some kind of disorder, or even the way that they're behaving is attached to some type of disorder, that that the wisdom that you were sharing doesn't always get translated into what's happening with them at that point in time. So, do you have some thoughts a little bit on that as well?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that when people are given a disorder or a diagnosis, they're not we were talking about this a little bit before on how like they're placed inside of a box and they're kind of told that that's just their means of existence. That happened to me at a young age, and it kind of kills hope within that, which is horrible because the one thing about humans that's phenomenal is we have this resiliency just so innately within us. Like, we're always growing and expanding and capable of so many things that nothing about us is necessarily fixed. So to say that someone is stuck in a mindset is it's a very, very sad thing, and is quite frankly very upsetting because we as people we are going to grow, we're going to expand, and we're going to continue adapting to our environment. It's in our DNA. It's something that has happened from the beginning of time is we have always survived and surpassed and thrived. So to be stuck in this idea of I am a certain way is almost like a death sentence and is super heartbreaking for the individual. So I think I would just like to remind people that you are not a diagnosis. You are not anything that you don't think you are, and you are always capable of change. If you don't like how something, then you are capable of expanding and growing and surpassing it and working with it and expanding in a way that makes it workable or manageable. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about being human and alive is our capability of growth.
Yes. And 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 how do we keep hope alive when we're maybe hearing things that either do kind of resonate within us or it doesn't resonate within us? Um, I think I was reading something today and it talked um about that perhaps in our descriptions of diagnoses or labels, we forget to humanize them,
Mhm.
and that descriptions become so formulaic, so ununique. um, instead of instead of capturing the uniqueness and the strengths that that everyone has, no matter how old they are or how or what they're doing at this point in time. Regardless of um, what has happened in the past. I think when I hear stories of suffering, a lot of it at times is facing one's past and making sense of one's past and coming to terms like with what you were talking about is that it was one season. It doesn't mean that the next season is going to be the same.
Yeah, yeah. Um, every season is different and brings different things to the forefront. But going back to what you were saying about how do we keep this hope alive, I think that that's a long journey, and it's an everyday choice. What has personally helped me keep my hope alive has been, making sure to have good people in my life that are very encouraging and are very positive. Or I also like to write gratitude lists. Like, often whenever I'm in a really difficult spot, I'll make myself write down 10 things I'm grateful for every day until I start feeling better. And it sometimes gets very, very, very specific to, like, even like the cup of coffee, or the way that the light was shining through the window. I think that focusing on what is going well in the life um, is going to invite more of that good energy in, because what you focus on expands, right? So whenever I'm in those dark moments and I really just go back to my gratitude lists and really go back to just being like, well, you know what? Right now may not be great, but I have coffee, or I have tea, or I have a mother that loves me, and I have friends I can call, and I have people that care for me. So keeping hope alive, it's simple but yet very complex, and it takes a certain level of devotion and determination to be able to, despite being surrounded by darkness, focusing on those little glimmers that will keep you motivated, remind you that spring is going to come one day.
So I really appreciate what you were saying, because I think that keeping hope alive is something um, that we all do during, not during hard times, or even like, when I think of the word hope, it's such a happy word. Like there was this um, there was this theorist at one point in time, and he talked about expectations of hope. That if people had expectations of hope, then the ability for them to have and embrace solutions was um, I don't want to say it was easier, but it was more prevalent. And I think when we lose hope, that there's certain variables that are embodied in a sense of losing hope. And so if you had any ideas on um, perhaps what helped you when you were in a place of hopelessness, other than the ones that you've mentioned so far?
Ooh, another really awesome thing that has helped me through my journey has been, well, I'm an artist, right? So for me, going to art museums and just surrounding myself with beauty, surrounding myself with nature, and traveling, and really just exploring the world on a different level, where I'm very actively seeking out the good in the world, that that will resurrect the hope within you.
Mhm.
um, there's something so magnificent of going into a museum and losing yourself in these masterworks, something that people have poured their lives into, of capturing a beautiful moment. It's so inspiring, like this, to look at an artist and be so in love with a moment, reality itself, or a person, or even a place. It's contagious.
Mhm.
It's it's so contagious Oh my gosh. I could ramble about this forever, but even if you like want to look at like landscape paintings and see how like Monet loved like the water lilies and this admiration of simple things of like color or shape, they poured years of their lives into sharing this beautiful moment in the world, and there's something phenomenal about that. So go out in the world, go out, explore, seek out the beauty, go to art museums, find other people, because other people, there's something so healing too about connection as well, because we're meant to be with other people. We're not meant to be alone in our suffering. And even if it's a really dark moment that we're going through, like going through it with other people makes you feel so much better as a person and just innately connected.
I really wish I had written down what you were talking about. But we'll get the transcripts because I I was really mesmerized by what you were immersing my brain in as I was traveling and making my own sense of that. You know, I had these visions when you were talking of, what if clinicians could take people to an art gallery instead of focusing on the pain that someone's going through at that point in time. Um, what if we had, you know, children getting out of the hospitals that instead of going to like aftercare groups at a hospital, that there was somebody that was like an artist or an artist and a life coach, taking them, and they would spend maybe those 4 weeks exploring different art museums or experiencing slides of different types of art, and experiencing that medium without necessarily having to talk about darkness, but maybe having opportunities to talk about lightness or possibilities of lightness, that where the medium isn't even a person, but the medium is like a canvas and a paintbrush, and what that can offer people.
I love that dream. And I think that that's honestly would be such a beautiful key to helping people, especially in America, um, find even like when we look at painters that choose to paint really dark and gory subjects, there's a refined beauty to it. There's always a beauty within the darkness, and that's why it ended up in a museum, is because there's always going to be something beautiful. And I think that as an artist, it teaches us, like, as an artist or consumers of art, or, art critics, or just a casual enjoyer, it teaches us to look at the world in a different way. And I think that that is innately hope itself. It's very, very healing. And uh, yeah, I think that if instead of throwing people through cycles of trauma and forcing them to focus on their pain in a way that isn't feeding their soul, would be revolutionary. And yeah, I would hope to do that. I would hope to. I think it would save a lot of lives.
I don't know if we discussed this before, but when we were working a lot using the horses as a medium, people would come in for trauma And we would have some idea of what the trauma was, especially with, you know, because they would come in with a lot of times their families, or perhaps a social worker was referring if we had people that were under 18 coming in with their families. And so someone would, even on the forms that they would sign, right, there would be like a little thing that said what brought you into therapy. So at some point in time, you had these a lot of details about maybe what happened to somebody. And I can remember at one point in time, we had a client at least a decade ago say that um, they were so appreciative that we didn't talk about uh, the darkness, some of the darkness that had happened, because it was their story, and they had shared that story before with social workers or with police officers or with the schools or with other therapists, and they really wanted to be seen just as the person they were. And it didn't mean that they weren't suffering, but they didn't want to focus on darkness. They didn't want to focus on hopelessness that sometimes that you find and talking about things that were traumatic. They wanted to talk about what you were talking about, that kind of in every dark spot that we're in, that there has to be some light at the borders, you know, that that maybe that there's hope encircling those narratives. And maybe how do we, whether it's mediums of horses or mediums of art, or even if you don't have those mediums, how do you somehow grab onto some of that light so that light can somehow rise to the top of the conversation? And out of that conversation, find more light. Would you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So it is a way of training your brain for sure, of focusing on like the good that can come out of things. I know that um I went through a really dark spot a couple years ago when my grandma died, because my grandma was, her and I were extremely close. So losing her was very shattering, to say the least. Um but I remember that when she was on her deathbed, I had this thought that was going through my head, and it was like, how beautiful is it to have loved something so much that it shatters me when it's gone?
Mhm.
And this, and when she did die, me and my whole family, we were all in the backyard of my grandma's house. We were all crying together. And I had this moment in my mind where I was like, it's so beautiful to have a community of people to cry with. And I taught myself how to paint portraits because I wanted to share my grandma's beauty. And so I painted a portrait to her for her, and we put it at her funeral, and it's still at my grandma's house. But I wouldn't have taught myself that skill if I didn't love her so much, and
Mhm.
if it wasn't so hard for me to like find light within that dark moment of just being like, oh, okay, it's dark right now and it's scary, but I'm gonna grab the thing that I know will bring me out, which is this idea of hope. Like I wanted to share her beauty. I wanted to share her love in the world with me. So I learned how to paint portraits because of her. I learned a new skill. I grew so much deeper in the connection with my family because of, like, yes, it's horrible to lose someone or to go through something that's so dark, but creates a sense of connection and training our brains to remember, to actively seek out the light in the dark.
Mhm.
It's hard, but it takes dedication. And, you know, this, to me, this is the artist's way, is to, no matter what, look for the beauty within something. Um, you know, going to school for art has taught me, when even analyzing works of art that are not necessarily considered great or not necessarily any of it, you have to look for something positive within it. That's like one of the first things that we're taught, like with critiquing art. It's like, okay, look for what is working within the piece. What is working? Is it the colors? Is it the composition? It's you may not like any of it, but you learn to train your brain to be like, okay, I like the way that this is shaped, or I like the color of it, or yeah, it's definitely a process to teach your mind to focus on the good, to focus on what is working within it.
Mhm.
And you know, if we continue to focus on those things, and suddenly our whole reality shifts.
Mhm.
Like, now I don't look at sunsets the same way. I used to look at sunsets and they were just another sunset, it was just another day passing. But now I look at sunsets with more kinder, wiser eyes. I have an appreciation for the color of it. I have the appreciation for, you know, the energy that the sun has given us. I look at the composition of the clouds, and I'm just in awe of the beauty of, even though the night is coming, or aka the darkness is coming to consume us, there's still something so beautiful about it. And when the night does come, then we're engulfed by stars, and we learn to appreciate the sun all over again when it rises again. And
So I know, I think that this has been such a beautiful conversation about um of seeing beauty and of seeing possibilities and of alternative to seeing things even when trauma might be beckoning, or or responses to trauma are beckoning. You know, the things that you talk about are things that we call in our theoretical um, way of being with clients is that these are self-tailored solutions. So in my mind, the role of a therapist is to help people find possibilities and to not ignore the darkness, but sidestep it in favor of what possibilities and solutions are there. I remember when I was doing my research project for my dissertation, and it was on something that I've spoken about before, which is process ethics, which is what is the right and good in therapy for each person. It's not for all persons, it's for each person in therapy. So I was doing some um, kind of like some talks like we're doing right now, on more specific themes. And I remember this one woman said to me that the things that gave her light and the things that gave her hope were that this was before this was before cell phones were popular, that she had my pager number, that she had somehow programmed in her landline, like that I was the first, like you could like speed dial me and she could reach me. She never called me, mind you, but she knew that she could call if she thought that she was in trouble. And the other thing was that in my office, I had this nice couch, and it was a full length couch, and it was comfortable. And those were two of the things that brought her that light and hope. And from that, this woman, this was many, many, many years ago, this woman went on to do great things in her life that I, of course, wasn't clever enough to tell her to do. Right? Oh, I think you should do this and that, and this will be great in your life. But it was that impetus of what I think that you're talking about, of someone becoming not in a habit, but in a way of being, of finding a way of being, that there was light and hope more than the darkness that drove them to seek services.
What a beautiful thing it is to have people that care. And I think that care is such a contagious thing, which is why I have so much admiration for the work that you do, because it's a reminder that there are other people that have gone through and walked through these dark corners of life and have made it through. And it's so inspirational to remind us that we are not bound to this darkness, and we can find the light, and we can find, those glimmers of joy even within the void. That's so phenomenal that she was able to find that joy with you, and that's so awesome, because people have innate care within them. It's so human to love other people and to care and to build this sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's such a beautiful, beautiful healing thing to remind ourselves other people care and people want us to do well, not because of our status or anything. It's just a matter of that we're all human and we all want to succeed together because we're from the same species. um I don't know, I talk to my friends a lot about how we're siblings in humanity, and it doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done. At the end of the day, we're all people of this planet, and we're all just going to care for each other. And I found that, like, especially when I was in Europe, and I was wandering, and I had like no money, and I was just figuring things out. And even though there were things like language barriers, I was from a completely different part of the world. um People care. People, you just have to put yourself out there and be like, I need a hug, universe. And the right people will come, and they'll hold you. And you know it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to connect with other people. And it can be scary, but it's healing on its own.
And it's my hope that you know um you know I think those connections have to contain, let me back up. I think that the connections and a sense of community embodied in that has to be caring and hope, and a lack of isolation. I you know people used to ask me, like, just questions, because I've been in the field for such a long period of time. And I also talked about that a lot of times when we're at our darkest is when we don't have those things, that, for some reason, maybe our families are small. I mean, small in numbers. So for some reason, that it's not that the caring isn't there, but maybe it's veiled by anger or so much concern or, um, you know, it's just easy for things to get very, very complicated. And, the woman that I was talking about, the example of the woman I was talking about, you know, she came in the first session and I was kind of taken back on how much she was suffering. So to think that these small variables that she found, I'm sure now using the word caring fits, um, in a sense of community, a lack of that sense of isolation that had been going on, that this person was able to make that for themselves without my having to point out the darkness because people already know that they're living with darkness. um, and so I do think that no matter how dark things are going, that there's always those conversations that's in that space, in that season, that we can make space for those conversations. One of the things that I try never to do if somebody's been having a difficult time is say, how have you been doing? Would you want to be known by how are you doing? I wouldn't want to be known by how am I doing, except it's a very easy thing, I think, for us as clinicians to always ask, how are you doing? How'd this week go? You know, like there's a lot of other things to start out a conversation with than those because people are going to tell you. Um, and I think especially, all clinicians care, but if somehow they're able to reflect that caring and feel comfortable with that in themselves, people will tell you things. I remember as a young therapist, you would hear, "Oh, well, people are going to lie to you." People don't lie to you. I mean, like they're going to lie to you if you like, in certain circumstances, maybe. But I think overall, we can't be a detective and try to ascertain if someone's lying or not. And, at the end of the day, I think if people feel listened to, they're going to um, be pretty honest in whatever way that honesty is. But I think we could probably continue this conversation for a long time. We're trying to keep them a little bit shorter so that people don't um, lose their focus in listening. And, one of the things is that we always use these podcasts either for some type of training, whether it's either for clinicians or is also for um, for clients who are wanting perhaps some moments of hope in the seasons of what they're going through in this point in time. So, would you like to wrap up with a reflection, our wonderful guest?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because I could totally continue talking about this for hours, but we do want to, keep these nice and short and sweet. Um, but I guess in a wrap up, I would just say try to surround yourself with beauty, and that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. For me, it's studying art or calling a friend or, you know, dance even. I love dancing. But there is no one fits all. It's a very individual approach, but follow what makes you feel alive and what sparks that joy within you. And that's going to look completely different for everyone. For me, it's spending hours in museums and losing myself in that. Because then you just are reminded of the beauty of the world. because this world is a very, very beautiful place. You just need to know how to look at it.
And then I'm just gonna jump in, is that some people don't even know it's there. They've lost that ability to remember that there was beauty. But like somebody wisely has said, that how do you keep, and maybe we can address that at another point in time, but how do you keep that patience to wait until you do have those kind of those moments that you can start to see again or feel again, or even think that you start to feel it and see again. So thank you so much for today, and we look forward to being able to talk with you in the near future.
Yay, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my voice. Thank you.
Please honor this person's story by sharing it with others to inspire hope.